Welcome to Thoughts and Theories. Albert Einstein. The name itself has become a symbol of genius. But behind the equations, behind the messy hair, and behind the image of a man lost in thought, there was something deeper. A mind that wasn't just exploring the universe through mathematics, but also through philosophy. Einstein was not only a physicist who changed how we see time and space, he was a philosopher who asked why we see it that way at all. To understand Einstein, we have to look beyond science. His theories didn't just rewrite physics, they reshaped how we think about existence itself. Before Einstein, the world seemed solid, certain, predictable. Newton had given us a mechanical universe, a grand cosmic clock where everything moved according to fixed laws. If you knew all the forces, you could predict the future. But Einstein came along and quietly shattered that clockwork certainty. He showed that time and space aren't fixed. They bend, they stretch, they depend on how you move and where you stand. What looks simultaneous to one person might not be to another. This was not just science. It was a new philosophy of reality. Einstein forced humanity to confront a strange idea. The universe is not what it seems to be. It doesn't obey our intuition. There is no single, universal now. Reality itself is relative. That idea shook not only physics but also human thought. Think about it. For centuries, people believed that truth was absolute. Whether in religion, politics, or morality, there was always one right perspective. Einstein's theory of relativity didn't directly challenge those beliefs, but it symbolically echoed a new way of thinking. It told us that even time and space depend on perspective. Suddenly, the idea that reality itself could shift based on the observer changed how we thought about everything else: knowledge, truth, even ethics. Einstein never called himself a philosopher, but he read philosophy deeply. He admired Spinoza, who believed that God and nature were one and the same. Einstein often said, "I believe in Spinoza's God, who reveals himself in the orderly harmony of what exists." For him, God wasn't a personal being who listened or intervened. It was the beauty of natural law itself, the rational structure of the cosmos. That's why when people asked him if he believed in God, he would answer in a way that puzzled both believers and atheists. He didn't believe in a God who rewards or punishes. He believed in the mysterious intelligibility of the universe. And that was his philosophy: wonder without superstition. Einstein's sense of awe didn't need religion. It came from looking at the stars, from realizing that the same laws that govern an apple falling also govern galaxies spinning billions of light years away. For him, the greatest miracle was that the universe is understandable at all. He once said, "The most incomprehensible thing about the world is that it is comprehensible." Einstein's life itself was a reflection of his philosophy. He questioned authority, doubted systems, and refused blind obedience. When he worked at the patent office in Bern, he was surrounded by the noise of ordinary life: papers, stamps, inventions. But his mind was quietly revolting against the biggest assumptions of physics. He asked questions others thought were closed. What if light doesn't behave like people think it does? What if time itself is not constant? What if gravity is not a force, but a bending of space? These weren't just scientific questions. They were deeply philosophical. They came from the same kind of curiosity that drives someone to ask, why is there something rather than nothing? Why do the laws of nature exist in the first place? Einstein didn't settle for what he was told. He wanted to see the structure beneath the surface. But Einstein's philosophy wasn't just cosmic. It was deeply human. He was fascinated by the limits of human knowledge. He once said, "The more I learn, the more I realize how much I don't know." He saw science not as a collection of facts, but as a never-ending journey toward truth. That humility, that willingness to accept uncertainty, was at the heart of his worldview. He often warned against dogma. Whether scientific or religious, he believed certainty was the enemy of understanding. That's why he distrusted both rigid materialism and religious fundamentalism. He said, "Science without religion is lame. Religion without science is blind." But when he said religion, he didn't mean belief in divine beings. He meant a feeling of reverence, an awareness that existence is far greater than us. In a world that often divides people into believers and non-believers, Einstein stood in between. He lived in the space of wonder, the place where you don't have all the answers but remain amazed that there are answers to seek at all. He saw the scientist and the philosopher as partners in curiosity. He also understood that science could not answer every question. It could tell us how things work, but not why they matter. That's where his humanism came in. Einstein spoke often about peace, compassion, and justice. During wars and political conflicts, he used his fame to advocate for conscience over nationalism. He saw humanity as one interconnected species traveling through space together. That's a philosophical stance as much as a moral one. Einstein once said, "Our task must be to free ourselves from this prison by widening our circle of compassion to embrace all living creatures." That idea came from his sense of relativity, not just physical, but moral. If perspective shapes reality, then empathy is the ability to see from another's point of view. It's the moral version of relativity. To realize that the world looks different depending on where you stand, and that understanding that difference is the beginning of peace. Even in his scientific work, Einstein struggled with questions that went beyond math. When quantum mechanics rose to prominence, Einstein disagreed with the idea that randomness ruled the universe. He famously said, "God does not play dice with the universe." To him, that wasn't a religious statement. It was philosophical. He couldn't accept that reality was ultimately chaotic. He believed there must be deeper order we simply hadn't discovered yet. He spent decades searching for a unified theory, one law that would explain everything, from gravity to the smallest particles. He never found it, but his pursuit symbolized something profound: the human desire for unity and meaning in a fragmented world. Einstein's wonder wasn't naive. He lived through 2 world wars, witnessed the atomic bomb, a weapon born from his own discoveries. He felt guilt and sadness knowing that humanity had turned knowledge into destruction. He spent his later years warning the world against power without wisdom. His scientific curiosity was always tempered by moral awareness. That balance between knowing and wondering is what makes Einstein not just a scientist, but a philosopher of life. He didn't claim to have the final truth. In fact, he distrusted anyone who said they did. He saw truth as something you approach, not possess. That's why his curiosity never ended, because the mystery itself was the source of meaning. Einstein reminds us that philosophy doesn't have to be abstract or distant. It can live in the questions we ask every day. What is time? What is reality? What gives life its value? These questions aren't limited to classrooms or temples. They're part of being human. He once said, "The important thing is not to stop questioning. Curiosity has its own reason for existing. That is the heart of Einstein, see philosophy. That meaning isn't given to us from outside, but discovered through our search. The universe doesn't hand us answers, but it invites us to ask. And in that asking, we become part of the mystery itself." In the end, Einstein's greatest legacy isn't just relativity. It's wonder, the idea that rationality and awe can coexist. You don't have to believe in divine intervention to feel reverence for the cosmos. You can see the equations and still feel the beauty. So when we look up at the night sky, when we see the bending of light from distant stars, we're not just seeing physics, we're seeing philosophy in motion. We're seeing what Einstein saw, that the world is strange, that truth depends on perspective, and that understanding even a small part of it is enough to fill a lifetime with awe. Albert Einstein taught us that intelligence is not about having answers, but about never losing the curiosity to keep asking. That is what makes him not only the scientist of relativity, but the philosopher of wonder.